Hello, I'm back. It's patch1stripe.com TV replacement parts. Today, this video is about soldering and how to identify bad solder joints or connections. I'm also going to give you an example how I will go about reflowing these bad connections, as well as I'll give you an example of how I desolder a component with the equipment that I use. So with that being said, let's get on to the video. This particular television is a Samsung UN58H 5202. It was manufactured in October 2014. Using the process of elimination, I narrowed down the problem to be this particular board. It's the same process that I give you on one of my previous videos. This particular power supply is a BN44-00787A. Now I'm giving you all this information because going by the part number here, the model number here, this probably was a Sam's or Walmart type sold TV, which that means it'll probably have a lot of them out there. And a lot of them have this exact same problem. So, to get on with it, the problem that they had was that I got this particular set, it was a dead set. But I'm gonna guess, because of the age and the usage of this particular TV, being someone retired, TV get played a lot, all day, every day, that they probably had some problems with it before it finally went all the way out, as in intermittent on and off, coming on when it want to, go off when it want to. Okay, so I'm going to give you all some tips to go by if you're having this problem with a power supply or any other power supply, what to look for. Okay, now at the top of this board, this is how I could tell this unit has been used extensively. Look at what I call the hot spots. Look at the browning discoloration of this board right here. Look at the discoloration here. Look at the discoloration around these diodes that make up the bridge rectifier. Look at the browning around this transformer. And a little bit around this. But this is major, this major, that's major. And anything with a heat sink. This heat sink is to dissipate heat from components that produce heat. And this helps to keep them cool, helps them from failure. So let's flip this board up and see what we got. Remember, these are two hot spots right here, right? Okay. This component is getting hot. These are getting hot. Now I did some checks on this board before I made this video. And these components checked okay. But if you look, I have circled some red connections, some red solder connections, throughout this board, and those were identified as cracked circuits. Now I have some photographs that I'm going to share with you also in this video, big time close-ups, where you can actually see what a cracked circuit look like. Because a lot of time people contact me and I'll tell them look for cracked circuits, and basically if you never have seen one, you don't know what you're looking for. So I took some still photographs of all of these areas to give you some examples of what to be looking for when you have an intermittent problem with a power supply board. Now, think about this. When I'm saying an intermittent problem, and that's with any sort of electronic device, when you have a device that works sometime, don't work sometime, don't work sometime, you need to be looking for some cracked or bad solder joints on some boards, especially your power supply boards. Because one thing that's certain about an electronic component, it either works or it don't work. Now sometimes you have ICs that have a heat and cooling type issue where a technician could go in and freeze the IC and she start working, but that's going to be momentarily. And that's how, that's a technique we use to find them. Or if something is working, we put heat on it to make it fail. So that's a little bit different than what I'm talking about, because that's some internal things that's going on with an IC, which is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of components internally into that little chip that you're looking at, or this little IC that you're looking at. So to keep everything moving, you should be looking for cracked circuits. In this video, that's what I'm going to do. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and give you the close-ups of all these particular bad solder joints. I call them solder joints or connections. And then we'll go on with the reflow or resoldering process. Okay, now that you all have looked over the photographs and hopefully paused whatever you needed to do to really commit what a cracked circuit looks like to memory, let's go ahead and reflow these bad solder connections. Okay, the equipment that I use and is a paste desoldering soldering station. Now this is a industrial piece of equipment. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I've worked my way up to some of the best stuff to use to be proficient because of the volume sometimes I have to handle. I don't be playing around. But you could use whatever you have. If you got a soldering gun type iron, or you have, a little pencil type iron, all that is good. Okay. This is what my desolderer look like. You press this button, and you press this button right here, and it'll suck the solder off the circuit. This is pretty cool. I got a chamber in here, a glass chamber in here where it collects the solder, and I go in periodically and clean it out. This is my soldering iron I use. It has a keen tip, but depending on what I'm working on, I have all sorts of tips that I use in this particular soldering iron. Okay. You know, like I told you about this being my desolderer, a lot of guys, I still got my desoldering wick, okay? It comes in handy depending on what I'm working on or what I got to work with or what I'm doing, okay? This is my little tip cleaner here, and it's pretty cool. A lot of people likes to use this, wet this sponge and all that kind of stuff. I never did like that. I like this because it's metallic, and it'll pretty much clean up a tip really good. See, so that's what I like. See the little shine coming back on here? And that's what I like. I don't like, you know, putting my tips and getting them wet. After all, it's metal. Next thing you know, you got rust or whatever may happen. I don't know. I just don't do it. This is some of my flux. This is my flux that I use. I mean, they got all kind of brands out there. This one I was trying. I don't use flux too often, like on everything I do. I use flux whenever it's necessary, sometime, depending on if I'm doing some really fine work and I got to clean up the board. That'll come in handy, or I'm reflowing a chip with a bunch of pins on it. That'll come in handy. It's my solder. This is what I use, a 60-40 mix. And I don't use that lead-free solder. It's very difficult to handle and make a good job. I use the traditional solder that I've always been using, and a lot of guys I've seen on, especially where you have ICs and microprocessors that seem to be intermittent. A lot of guys, especially with computers and stuff, these guys will go back in there, pull that BGA out, which is a ball grid array, that chip that lay flat. You can't see any pins because it's balls under the bottom of them, quite a few. They'll pull that thing off of there, and they'll clean that lead-free solder off of there and go back with some leaded solder, because it's more durable and it lasts long. And you know, the industry has tried that, they pushed that, but in all practicality, this lead combination is still the best thing that's going. This deal here, just in case you see it and want to know what it is, this is what I use, like, to go in there and clean out. I use this to go in there and clean out the tips, just in case you want to know what this is, and clean out the tips of my my desoldering tool. Let me show you here. Insert that in there, and you go in there and push that old solder out, push it down in there, whatever, if it's clogged up, and I clean it up. So this is just the array of different gauge little wires to go in there and clean out your tips, depending on what tip you're using and all that good stuff on your desoldering tool. Okay, so that's what that is. So with that being said, I'm going to get into some basic, one basic, and it's the most important thing in making a good solder job. You do not put your tip on the component while you're heating up your soldering iron. You take the chance of damaging the circuit, damaging the circuit pad, damaging a component. You know, that is just a no-no for a good solder joint. Okay? And for me, it's simple as this. Let me reach around here and trying to work with the camera and everything and show you. Simple as this. Put that solder on that tip, and when it melted like that, now you're ready to go. And it's when it come down to soldering, it's about how fast you can hit it and get off of it without overheating your component. So this is the best test where if you got a gun, you hold that trigger on that soldering gun till it get hot enough where you melt your solder, you ready to go. You don't hold that soldering iron on any component, wire, or anything while to warm up to temperature before you start soldering. So with that being said, like I say, you waiting for it to get here, and then you wanted to do that. See, it's ready to go. It's ready to go. Okay? In most cases, some of them have a ring around them and it's a little brittle look to it. Well, all of that comes from heating, cooling, heating, cooling, heating, cooling, till the metal used to that the solder is composed of, it just breaks down. It begins to get brittle. It's no longer ductile, it begins to get brittle. And you start getting the cracked circuits. And sometimes you have to look at things like that when you're inspecting a board that you might see, well, this board needs to be replaced. Well, you look under the bottom of the board, and it may be some real obvious, because what I showed you on this video is not the worst case scenario that I've seen. I've seen some, you actually see space around the circle. I mean, you'll know it, but at least this will give you something to go by and what you should be looking for when you inspecting a board that's acting in an intermittent way for loose connections, the possibility of loose connections. And I always, my transformers, because they can be very elusive, I just go ahead and resolder those anyway. Okay? But for right now, we're just going to give this demonstration on pretty much how I roll. Hit it enough so it could flow, get off of it. Nice, shiny, slick surface, get up off of it. See that? Feed that solder into it. Get off of it. Feed that solder into it. You don't want to be laying on these components a long time waiting on the gun to get hot. Have that soldering iron ready to go. And see how smooth that flow? Look how that flows. And you let it lay on there. You don't want to do a cold joint, but you don't want it to stay long. Okay? Now I know this is a transformer right here. So while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and hit these. Now, what I do for big surfaces like that, I like to use a bigger tip. But with this soldering equipment that I have, a lot of times I just go ahead and pull out this desoldering tool because it's hot as well, and it'll put out a little bit more heat to it, and I'll use it. See there? I'll use it to reflow the solder because it's such a big pad and a lot of solder, and sometimes the little small tips is not enough. Now watch this. I'm going to show you how I do a desolder right quick, then I'm going to go ahead and solder it back. See, it just melted? Watch this. Look at that. Ain't that neat? Ain't that neat? The solder going all the way around from the pin. Watch, I'll do another one for you. Look at that. It's good to have some good equipment. See how quick and easy I do that? Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead, go back and just reflow the solder here on this pin here, on this transformer. You got to give it some solder, give it something to go on. And like I said, if I had a bigger tip on my soldering iron over there, it'll flow. But like I said, I don't like to lay on none of my components for a long time, because then you're headed for possible damage to your component. We can get this little piece off of here. That's a candidate for a short circuit. And basically, I'm just using this for a bigger tip, dissipate more heat. That's all. Got a nice size soldering tip on your soldering iron. Go for it. Just feel your way. You know, you got to master your equipment. You know, I've mastered mine. You got to master yours. You know, work with what you got. After all, you can have the best equipment in the world and not know what to do with it. I mean, what good is it to have it? So whatever you got, master it. So you'll be prepared for something something better in the future. When you move up to that point, and see, here we are. This is another sort of big soldering pad here, and I'm gonna bring this out to dissipate more heat so I could really solder it. Because some of these things, you can't really, the solder connection could be so hidden that you miss it. Especially with transformers or anything on these big pads like this. You just might not see it. And another thing, while we're looking at this, when you're looking for cracked circuits, get you a good light source. A really good light source, okay? And you got what I do, and let me see. What I do is up. See, I'm just hitting some of these random. You know, while I got it, get it. And see, but when I use this particular thing, because I'm comfortable doing this, if I have too much solder, I just suck it up. I have too much solder, I just suck it up, clean it up, and go back after it again. I'm gonna flip this over for you, and I'm gonna hit these two right here, and that'll be the end of this video. Maybe. That'll be the end of this process. Let's put it like that. Because I've went through this particular board, and I ID'd some suspected bad solder connections, and I circle them in red for you guys to make it easy for you to follow and easy to go back and look. Okay, now let me give you a demonstration what I was talking about rolling this board. See, when you have this board, just look at any connection on here, mainly like round in here. Watch how I do cast shadows and highlights and stuff. You see that? And you look at the photographs that I gave you earlier. Different angles bring up different things. It makes the cracks easier for you to see. So I like to roll the board while I'm looking for them, on which we're talking about cracked circuits, and that's the way I find them. That is the way I find them. I roll the board in a good light source. Can you see what it's doing? It do different things. Oh. See? That's what I like to do, to find them. Oh yeah. And by the way, you guys thought I was going to keep you hanging, right? Well, I tried the board. I'm getting all my voltages on the board. The board was not the problem, but the potential for problems was there, and we did what I call a maintenance on that board by reflowing the solder in those bad on those bad solder circuits. So this the news y'all waiting on. And the problem was bad LED strips. Multiple bad LED strips. The part number is BN96-32771 Alpha and BN96-32772 Alpha. I don't carry those strips. I found them on eBay. They had a seller with new strips out of Tucker, Georgia. I'm going to give him a shot. 49 bucks. So once you replace those, that nice big beautiful TV will be back in action. Okay, so this concludes our video of soldering. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. And remember, patchonestripe.com TV replacement parts is your one-stop shop for sometimes hard to find plasma TV parts, TV stands, remotes, boards, cables, etc. So please keep us in mind, and until the next time, patchonestripe.com, you know the deal. We out of here.